The great hall of Moonvale Castle glittered with silver light. Candles floated in the air, held steady by pack magic, and the scent of white roses filled every corner of the room. Tonight, Lyra Ashworth would become Queen and Luna of the most powerful werewolf kingdom in the land. She stood before the crowd in a gown the color of moonlight, her chin lifted, her smile wide and confident. She had waited 3 years for this moment. Alpha King Draven Voss sat upon his throne, watching her with an expression that was hard to read. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes that had not truly smiled in a long time. The pack believed he was simply a serious ruler, a king who carried the weight of his kingdom quietly. Only a few knew the truth. Only a few remembered the woman who used to sit beside him, the woman whose name was no longer spoken in the castle halls. Her name was Seraphine Cross. She had been his first Luna, his true mate, the woman chosen by the moon itself to stand at his side. 3 years ago, she had vanished in disgrace, accused of betraying the pack to their oldest enemies. Draven had believed the evidence against her. He had believed Lyra, his loyal second-in-command, who had come to him with tears in her eyes and proof in her hands. He had banished Seraphine that same night, without giving her the chance to speak. He did not know, even now, that she had been carrying his children. Far from the castle, in a small cottage at the edge of the Whisperwood, Seraphine knelt beside a stream and watched her reflection ripple in the water. She was no longer the soft, trusting girl who had once believed in fairness and love. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of raising 2 children alone, 3 years of quiet grief had changed her. Her eyes, once warm, now held a steady calm that came from surviving the unthinkable. Beside her stood her twin children, Kale and Ren, 11 years old, strong for their age, their wolf senses already sharp. They did not remember the castle. They did not remember their father. All they knew was the mother who had protected them, taught them, and never once told them to hate the man who had cast her away. "Mama," Ren said softly, "are we really going back?" Seraphine looked at her daughter, then at her son, who watched her with the same steady patience she had taught them both. "Yes," she said. "Tonight, the truth comes home." She had spent the last few months building a quiet network of allies inside Moonvale. Commander Rurik, the retired beta who had trained under her father, had never believed she was capable of betrayal. Old Matron Yu, the pack's aging seer, had sensed the lie in Lyra's story from the very beginning, but had lacked the proof to challenge it. Together, piece by piece, letter by letter, they had uncovered what really happened 3 years ago. Lyra had forged the evidence herself. She had paid a rogue wolf from the rival pack to plant false messages, making it look as though Seraphine had been secretly meeting with the enemy. She had done it because she wanted the throne, and because she wanted Draven, and because Seraphine stood in the way of both. What Lyra never knew was that one of the messengers she had used, a young wolf named Toby, had kept a copy of the real orders for himself, afraid that one day he might need proof of his own innocence. That copy had been hidden for 3 years. Rurik had finally found him, and Toby, older now and burdened with guilt, had agreed to speak the truth. Tonight, everything Lyra had built out of lies would finally come apart. Seraphine stood, brushing the dirt from her cloak. "Stay close to me," she told her children. "Whatever happens tonight, you are safe. You are mine, and you are his, and no one in that hall can take that from you." Kale nodded, his jaw set in a way that reminded her painfully of his father. "We're ready, Mama." They began the long walk back toward the castle, the moon rising slowly above the trees, lighting their path like an old friend welcoming them home. Inside the great hall, the coronation ceremony had begun. The pack elders stood in a circle around the small stone dais where Lyra waited, her hands folded, her smile never faltering. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. She had imagined the crown settling on her head, imagined the pack bowing before her, imagined finally being enough. Draven rose from his throne and walked toward her, carrying the silver circlet that marked a true Luna. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his chest felt strange, heavy, as though a part of him was resisting what his hands were about to do. He thought of Seraphine more often than he let anyone know. He thought of her laugh, quiet and real, nothing like Lyra's practiced charm. He thought of the night he had banished her, The way she had looked at him, not with anger, but with a quiet, broken disbelief, as though she could not understand how the man she loved could turn away so quickly. He told himself, as he always did, that he'd had no choice. The evidence had been clear. He was a king before he was a husband, and a king could not ignore proof of betrayal. But lately, small things had begun to trouble him. An old guard who mentioned, almost in passing, that he had never quite trusted the messenger who brought the evidence. A letter that Rurik had shown him last week, filled with details that did not match Lyra's story. A feeling, deep and unwelcome, that he had made a terrible mistake 3 years ago and had simply been too afraid to look closely enough to see it. He lifted the circlet toward Lyra's head. And then the great doors of the hall opened. A cold wind swept through the room, scattering the floating candles for just a moment before the pack's magic steadied them again. Every head turned, every whisper stopped. Seraphine stood in the doorway. She wore no crown, no fine gown, only a simple traveling cloak, yet she carried herself with a quiet strength that made the entire hall fall silent. Beside her stood 2 children, a boy and a girl, their eyes scanning the room with the same calm intensity as their mother's. Lyra's smile froze on her face. Draven's hands went still, the circlet forgotten between his fingers. "Seraphine," he said, and his voice cracked on her name in a way he had not expected. "Hello, Draven," she said. Her voice was steady, carrying easily across the silent hall. "I hope I am not too late for the ceremony." Lyra recovered first, stepping forward with a look of practiced concern. "Seraphine? But we heard you had left the kingdom for good. You should not be here. This is a sacred night." "I am aware of how sacred it is," Seraphine said, her eyes never leaving Lyra's face. "Which is exactly why I came." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Old Matron Yu stepped forward from among the elders, her staff tapping softly against the stone floor. "Let her speak," the seer said. "The moon herself has brought her back on this night. That is no accident." Draven descended from the dais, moving toward Seraphine as though pulled by something beyond his control. His eyes moved from her face to the 2 children standing beside her, and understanding began to dawn, slow and painful. "Are they yours?" Seraphine said quietly. "Kale and Ren, born 6 months after you sent me away." The hall erupted into whispers. Draven felt the ground shift beneath him, 3 years of grief and guilt crashing into him all at once. He had a son, a daughter, children he had never known, raised alone by the woman he had wronged. Lyra's composure cracked, just slightly, before she smoothed it over again. "This changes nothing," she said, her voice sharp now. "Whatever happened between you two, Seraphine was banished for betraying this pack. Children do not erase that crime." "No," Seraphine agreed. "They don't, but the truth does." She turned to Rurik, who stood near the back of the hall with young Toby beside him, pale but resolute. "Commander," she said, "please bring forward the witness." Rurik stepped forward, guiding Toby into the center of the hall. The young wolf's hands trembled, but his voice, when he spoke, was clear. "3 years ago," Toby said, "Lyra Ashworth paid me to deliver false messages between the rival pack and Seraphine's name. There was no betrayal. There were no secret meetings. I carried papers that Lyra wrote herself, and I placed them where they would be found. I was young and afraid, and I needed the money she offered. I have carried this guilt every day since." The hall went utterly silent. Draven turned slowly toward Lyra, his expression shifting from confusion to something colder, harder. "Is this true?" "He's lying," Lyra said quickly. "Or confused. It was 3 years ago. He could easily be mistaken." "I kept the original letter," Toby interrupted, pulling a folded, weathered piece of paper from inside his coat. "The real one, in your handwriting, with your seal. I was afraid, so I kept it. I never thought I would need it, but I could not bring myself to destroy it either." Old Matron Yu took the letter, examining it with the practiced eye of someone who had read 1,000 pack documents in her long life. She looked up, her face grave. "This is Lyra's seal. There is no mistaking it." The pack elders began to murmur among themselves, their voices growing louder, more urgent. Lyra's carefully built world was collapsing in front of everyone she had worked so hard to deceive. "I did it for this pack. Lyra said suddenly, her voice rising, desperate now. Seraphine was soft. She was too gentle to lead a kingdom like this one. I have spent 3 years proving I could be stronger, better. You spent 3 years lying to the man you claim to love, Seraphine said, her voice cutting through Lyra's words without needing to rise above a calm, steady tone. You did not do this for the pack. You did it for yourself. And you were willing to destroy a family and steal a mother from her children to get what you wanted. Draven looked at Lyra for a long moment, and something in his eyes finally closed, like a door shutting for the last time. He removed the silver circlet from where he still held it and set it down on the stone dais. Lyra Ashworth, he said, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority as king. By the ancient law of the Moon Court, you stand accused before this pack of forgery, deception, and the deliberate destruction of an innocent Luna's honor. Do you deny the evidence presented here tonight? Lyra opened her mouth, but no words came. The pack around her, wolves who had followed her, trusted her, some who had even called her friend, stared back with expressions of growing anger and betrayal. I have nothing left to deny, she finally whispered. Then you are stripped of your rank, your title, and your place within this pack, Draven said. You will leave Moonvale territory before the sun rises, and you will not return. 2 guards stepped forward to escort her from the hall. As she passed Seraphine, Lyra paused, her eyes filled with a hatred that had nowhere left to go. You think this makes you happy? She hissed. You think getting your title back will fix what he did to you? Seraphine met her gaze without flinching. I did not come back for a title, she said quietly. I came back for the truth, and I already have that. Lyra had nothing left to say. She was led from the hall, and the great doors closed behind her. The silence that followed was heavy, but it did not last long. Draven turned to Seraphine, and for the first time in 3 years, he allowed the pack to see him not as a king, but as a man who had made a terrible mistake and now had to face it. He knelt before her, right there in front of the entire pack, his head bowed. I failed you, he said. I failed our children before I even knew they existed. I let fear and pride convince me that I could not have been wrong. I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I am asking anyway. Seraphine looked down at him for a long moment. The old ache in her chest, the one she had carried for 3 years, did not disappear completely. Some wounds did not close simply because the truth had finally come out. But she felt something else too, something like the beginning of peace. I am not the same woman you sent away, she said. I have learned to survive without you. My children have grown up strong, and I am proud of the mother I became, even in exile. If I return to this pack, it will not be as the woman who waits quietly for a king's approval. It will be as their Luna, on my own terms, for as long as it takes to prove that I am not simply reclaiming what was taken, but choosing it freely. Draven lifted his head, meeting her eyes. Then let me earn that choice, he said, however long it takes. Kale and Ren moved to stand beside their mother, watching their father with cautious curiosity, 2 children meeting the king they had never known. Draven looked at them, his throat tight with emotion he had not allowed himself to feel in years. I would be honored, he said softly, to know you both, if you will let me try. Ren studied him for a moment, then glanced up at her mother, who gave a small, encouraging nod. Okay, Ren said simply. But you have to earn it. Mama says trust isn't given for free. A faint, surprised smile crossed Draven's face, the first real one the pack had seen from him in a long time. Your mother is right, he said. She usually is. The pack around them began to kneel, one by one, not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine respect for the woman who had returned, not seeking revenge, but justice. Old Matron Yu stepped forward and lifted the silver circlet from the dais, carrying it to Seraphine with careful hands. The moon chose you once, the seer said, and she has brought you home again. This belongs to you, Luna Seraphine, not because a king has offered it, but because you have earned it through truth and strength. Seraphine looked at the circlet for a long moment before accepting it, not as a symbol of return to what she had lost, but as proof of everything she had built in the years she had been forced to survive alone. She placed it on her own head, standing tall in the candlelight, her children beside her, the truth finally spoken aloud for everyone to hear. The pack rose together, and for the first time in 3 years, Moonvale Castle felt whole again, not because a king had reclaimed his queen, but because justice, patient and quiet, had finally found its way home.